cutting in and out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we're getting to it, and we're going to talk about this slate. So jump on in, guys, and let me know what you guys are doing, and we'll go from there. I don't want to on the live stream give away the. I can't show the sites. They get upset that we already got an email about it before. I did show you guys my early builds early on, and not a whole lot has changed for me. There's a few guys I've mixed in that I wasn't really thinking about before. It's maybe it's a little bit speculative. Beverly and Steven Adams on DK. Pretty much my FanDuel core is the same for those of you who check that out. So pop on in here though, ask your questions, say what's up. Glad to see you guys after the All-Star break. It was a really fun win to have the win the monster right before the break. Doing literally what I said on air, and then I posted the actual lineup as my early build. So for those of you guys who haven't been a part of it, please like and subscribe, and also check this out. I mean, that was legitimately, you could have copied and pasted that lineup. It's rare days in the NBA where things don't change, but you could have literally copied that lineup and won pretty much every single entry tournament there was. So I'm not saying that's the right way to do things. I'm just saying it gives you an idea that we're in the right place a lot of the time these days. So let's make sure to take advantage, and let's talk through some plays. What's up, Nick? What's up, buddy? What's up, K9 Bronco? Good to see you, man. Mark's got Mark. You guys don't know Mark Scalato. He's working with us now. He's literally the godsend for our site. So he's going to help everything get better and better as we go. We've got some other things coming up where we will have optimizers ready by March 7th, and we'll talk through it all once it comes a little closer, because we got to finish up a couple of deals first before we do. But let's get into the slate tonight. Pop on in, ask your questions. My priorities, are not a whole lot different, as I mentioned. I think that there's some interesting debates between certain plays tonight. I love that Minnesota-Memphis game. I also love I love the Atlanta-Chicago game, and I think at this moment I have more of Trae Young than I do of Ja, which was a big decision point for me. And I think that's going to be with the field, so I might even just want to make that one pivot. But I do think that's a really strong way to go. Your core plays are pretty obvious today. I think that Devin Booker on both sites. And I think that you could argue for James Johnson. You can argue for Rajon Rondo. You could argue for Brandon Goodwin's an interesting pivot off of Rajon Rondo. You could argue for Holiday, although I'm still not exactly sure. And we've seen him dud in games before, and I think it's going to be the Booker show. So maybe if you're not playing Booker in some lineup, that's where you'd want to play Holiday. But I think he's fine anyway. But there's a lot of value out there. There's potential. I don't think it's all lock value, but it is from what I can see pretty good value. I do think one of Rondo or Goodwin, but it is interesting that I do think Rondo's being a tiny bit over projected, even though I really like him, and it's leading to really, really inflated ownership. So I'm not going to have Rondo in every lineup. Trenton Watford is another one. He just signed a 4-year extension with Portland. I think he's another really good value. So my values would probably be on DraftKings. A combination of one of Rondo or Goodwin, probably Rondo for the most part, except for if you want to get off the board. I think you then would go to James Johnson. I do worry a little bit about that game and about the Nets in general without their 3 guys. And Boston's been beating the hell out of people. Aaron Holiday, I think, is interesting and speculative. I think Gary Payton, the second, is interesting and speculative, as I do with Okoro and Bagley. So I'm mixing and matching with some of these guys. DeAndre Hunter's another one that'll show up. I think you can play Bogdanovich in that game as well. I think you can play a Herder as well. But I think that's one interesting thing you do. You could just immediately pivot off of and get half the ownership and play Gallinari instead of a Hunter. Or you could play, a little bit a lower owned Herder, even lower than both those guys, who basically probably has a higher ceiling. And I think that's just a really good game environment to attack. So attacking Chicago, Atlanta, Chicago, the harder side to do. Levine's kind of the only one you can get to on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think it's still Levine. Memphis, Minnesota, I think Bane, and I would go in order. It would be really close between Triple J and Bane for me, but I also really like Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson Jr. at low ownership. And I love the Minnesota side where Beverly is going to get some ownership. Towns is going to get some ownership. D'Angelo Russell is not going to get much ownership, and neither is Anthony Edwards. So those are the guys I'm sort of leaning on just because I want to get off the chalk. But those are the guys you're focusing on, in my opinion. So that's sort of my overall what I'm doing. That's the most exposures I've got in my big lineups. I mean, I've got Bane in some. I've got actually more Bane on DraftKings than I do of Ja because of my siding a little bit with the wanting exposure to that game, but siding a little bit with Trey tonight just because I love the game environment. I think they're going to need him more possibly than they will Ja in Memphis. I really like, I mentioned the Edwards. I have one Edwards, one Russell run back. I like Jaylen Brown as just a standalone play. I sort of ended up with him in a few spots. Not my favorite thing to do, but I think first of all, he's safe enough, especially on FanDuel. And I think the matchup provides enough upside where you can take a shot on him and hopefully get one of his 50 games. I think that's very, very doable. It's just, I think it's a really solid play. I think Cade Cunningham is another one who people will play on FanDuel a lot more than they will on DraftKings. And I think he's completely fine on DraftKings. One narrative I like to look at right after the break is, guys who maybe you had a big all-star performance, maybe taking some shots on Steph tonight. Because I feel like if something happens, the momentum keeps carrying. And I also think that Cade is I think he would be legitimate play anyway. But I think that there is some upside, and you do have the number 1 versus 2 here with Cade and Mobley, and I think that both those guys are in play, but especially Cade because he's got the ball in his hands. Mobley more of a play on FanDuel for me. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing overall. Let's get into some questions. I like Kevin Love on FanDuel specifically, even with Markkanen playing. I think that Markkanen is going to be limited minutes wise. And I don't think, nobody's taking minutes away from Kevin Love. You could argue always that he's going to get more minutes, but he's projected for 25 minutes all the time. And the only way that he's getting less minutes basically is foul trouble of some sort, or that they literally are blowing somebody out. He's going to get his run. He's a great play on both sides, but I do still like Kevin Love anyway. And I don't think that Markkanen has a whole lot to do with it. I think his minutes projection is too high. Markkanen's, I don't know why he's projected at 28 minutes at what I'm looking at. I think he should be projected for around 24, somewhere between 20 and 24 probably. Doesn't really make sense to go crazy with him here. Not to mention Kevin Love is obviously a much, much better player than Markkanen is. It's not about who starts. Kevin Love is still one of their most important guys down the stretch. They're going to want to keep him healthy, so I think you're going to see 24 to 28 from Love in general. But that's plenty for me against Detroit. And we've seen him a million times put up 40 fantasy points this year in these matchups. So, I do still like him. I actually think everybody on the Cleveland side is maybe more in play because they're giving all the credit to Rondo, which, again, I like Rondo. But when you see the ownership getting to probably north of 50% in the high buy-ins, I think there are other pivots you can make, even though I expect Rondo to have a good game today. But Kevin Love being one way you can get away from some of that. All right, let's see. Is Jokic overpriced on DK? He's absolutely not overpriced ever. It would take for Jokic to be appropriately priced. He would probably have to be about 13.5, maybe 14. 14 is probably about where you draw the line. And even that is not really. I mean, I used to say this about Westbrook when he had the big year in OKC. It doesn't even matter. If you can afford it somebody easily, it's really depends on the slate. And in my opinion today, he is plenty easy enough to get in on both sites. Depending on how much value you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with taking shots on all of these value guys. Now, I don't feel like there's the automatic you must play. If I did, the most logical one is Rondo and Watford. But I don't think it's absolutely you have to do this because we're still speculating a bit. We don't know that Rondo's going to play 28 minutes and you're going to get 20 out of Goodwin. We don't know that Watford's going to play 27 minutes because I don't even know if he has yet. But he did sign that 4-year extension. They don't have a big. You don't necessarily need a big against Golden State. I just like the game environment for him, and I do like Watford. Actually, I might have more Watford than I do Rondo. It's really close between the two for me. Actually, I do have a little more Watford than Rondo, but that's just because I wanted to get off a little bit of the chalk, so I was trying to even it out. Do I like any Brooklyn Nets? That's a really good question because I do want to run some of the Celtics out there. Like I like Tatum a little bit. I like him a little more on FanDuel because he's easy to get in, and I like Jaylen Brown on both sides. So I will be mixing in a little bit of Patty Mills and a little bit of Seth Curry. I found myself doing it more on FanDuel. I don't necessarily think that's right. I just like the other guys in the pricing tiers more and the way my builds went on DraftKings more if I stayed away from that pricing tier, or I liked other guys in that pricing tier a little bit better than those guys. Levine or Simons on FanDuel? Great question right there from Dunbar. I think the answer, if you're playing Booker in a tournament, would naturally be Levine. I think Simons is the better expected average. But oddly enough, I think Levine has basically the same ceiling, maybe higher. And I'm just going to take a quick look at my ownership projections that's a really good question. I mean, that's mostly what I did. And I have 10 entries in the 150 on FanDuel, and where I am playing Booker, I'm playing Levine. and where I'm obviously playing Curry some because he's 9,300 over there. I forgot to mention that earlier. Where I'm playing Curry, I will play Simons and or Hart on the other side, and you're going to get higher ownership on Simons. So if you want a little bit of a reason to get off, that would be why. But Simons is the more obvious choice. For me, I like LaVine from the tournament perspective. I also like the back and forth possibilities with Booker, and if that game stays close, et cetera, et cetera. And as great as Simons has been, as great as he's been, and he's been great. He's been making a million shots. He's went, what has he gone? 5 of 11, 6 of 12. This is 3-point shooting. 5 of 11, 6 of 12, 7 of 16, 5 of 10. That he's a great shooter, but he's not a 50% 3-point shooter on that volume. So you can use that as an excuse. You can use the potential blowout as an excuse of why to fade a little bit of a chalky guy. I still like him, but I think that I'm going to go with a little bit more LaVine. And what I was saying is that with all this greatness, not any 50 fantasy point games except for, January 15th, he had one, and he had one on January 3rd. And he's had a lot of opportunity. So Zach LaVine at the same time, well, you may not get the same floor or the same usage rate. You've got a guy who actually can go in an equally great a much better matchup, I should say. LaVine just got the 50 the other day against Phoenix last week against one of the better defensive teams. And I expect this game to be close. So I'm a little bit leaning LaVine, but that's a really, really tough toss-up, and I like both of them. What's up, everybody? Sorry, I'm trying to catch up on questions. For some reason, it's doing a different thing. Restream, they must have adjusted for the All-Star break because I'm missing some of the older questions. So I'm sorry about that. Or maybe it's going in a different order. Let's see. I think it is just going in a different order. That's really strange. Maybe somebody updated our thing and I didn't know it because they're coming up in different directions. So as Rody says, hit the like button, guys. We really appreciate it. James Johnson on FanDuel viable? Absolutely, he's viable. I'm a bit thinner, so I think I have him in one of my 10, whatever you call it, bigger buy-ins, I guess you'd say. But I think you could just as easily also pivot over to Jared Vanderbilt if you somehow ended up in that price range. I would not advise playing Markkanen on the restriction. I did enter 150 in the $4. Markkanen will get my exposure in the $4 tournament. He won't get my exposure in the 150. But James Johnson, viable, yes. Awesome play? I don't think so, but certainly reasonable. Yes. Let's keep going. I went through my Nets already. Favorite spend ups on FanDuel. So this is a really interesting situation with FanDuel tonight because what you've got is basically a bunch of really good guards that I like in very similar ways. You've got the obvious Booker. We just talked about LaVine versus Simons. You could include D'Angelo Russell, who's going to get lower ownership because of those guys in that mix, and you could play a leveling out like that. I have less interest in the cheapo point guards on FanDuel than I do on DK because you don't really need that savings as much. You can sort of level out, and I'm even mixing in some Curry and some Patty Mills because if that game stays close, those are the guys who will be doing it. And again, I love that price of Jaylen Brown over there at 7,900. I even like Tatum at 99. So I think that's just a general way of looking at how do you build over there. So do you need to spend up? So I think the obvious just to answer the overall spend up question, Jokic is number one, but you can also mix in these 77-ish K guards. There's the 5-ish K Brooklyn guys. You've got the cheapie and Watford at power forward, who's I think he's not a lock on FanDuel, but for tournaments at 3,500, if you don't play him, you could just lose right away. But on the other hand, if he goes out there and gets you 18 fantasy points and only plays 20 minutes, you're doing great by getting off that chalk. I actually ended up eating most of that chalk because I am going to speculate that with the new deal, they're going to play their young guys and all that stuff. Even within the blowout risk, I think he's a little bit blowout risk proof. Whether he starts or not isn't even that relevant to me. I just want to play Watford here, so I'm going to. And then you've got a bunch of middling guys like DeAndre Hunter, Miles Bridges. Mikal Bridges, Kevin Love. Those are the middling ones, but the spend ups, Jokic and Trae Young, I mentioned already. Ja Morant, Steph Curry. I'm going to play the hot streak. Maybe he'll make 16 threes again tonight. I love Cade Cunningham as a mid-tier play. I think he's just like a cash game would be a lock for me, and he's really close to being one of my most. He's probably my fourth most owned player on FanDuel. But Booker and Jokic stand out above the rest. The guy who no one is playing tonight, and I want to make sure or people aren't playing, I haven't talked about enough, is Sabonis on FanDuel. I've heard people mention him on DraftKings at his price, but really he can have a 60-plus game on either site. So I like the idea of running a Jokic lineup back with Sabonis. And I just mentioned, there is value guys you can mix in to do it. Guys like Watford. You could, excuse me, James Johnson is viable. Not an exciting play, but again, cheap and viable. DeAndre Hunter, Mikal Bridges, Rajon Rondo, Aaron Holiday. All of these guys make all of these other guys, possible to get to these guys. I do really want to just reemphasize that one of Edwards, I know I say this a lot, but it's usually true, by the way. One of Edwards, Towns, and Russell is going to have a big game tonight. And I don't think that's a hot take, but I think everybody's taking Towns more. And I personally like the idea of trying Edwards and Edwards and Russell out. And especially because Russell's sort of jammed in with the other guys who are clearly like better statistical plays. I don't think he'll get quite the ownership he would normally. This could be like a 25% owned game for him. And I think it's going to be like 10. So that's the one thing I like doing. Long shot plays, Cedi Osman, Goodwin, assuming that he starts. Actually, even if Goodwin doesn't start, you could say Goodwin's a good long shot tournament play. Goodwin is not starting, by the way. So Rondo is going to be 1,000% owned. So if you want to do something different, you could try to fade Rondo. I think fading him on FanDuel is still very viable. I don't think you necessarily need it. I think he could put up 30 and you don't even need it. Now, it doesn't mean you don't want his 30, but I'm just saying there's plenty of ways you can get around that build. We talked about this on the show on that I won the tournament on Thursday. There are many good plays in the mid-tier, but I thought it was so, one of those slates that was so clear. If you could find a way to get up to all the three super spends in Luka, Giannis, and Embiid all at once, you're going to make a fortune. If your value gets it right, well, I got the value right, and I made it, well, whatever fortune. You made 65 times on your money with one entry and won the monster. That's the way I was building then. There's just different ways to build that can both get there on this slate. We got more games than we did Thursday. But do you want to go stars and scrubs on FanDuel when you don't necessarily need to? There is a bust path for Rondo here. I like Rondo, don't get me wrong, but there definitely is a bust path. Kevin Love, Cedi Osman could do it with the bench unit. Goodwin, I mentioned. They've got Lamar Stevens, who's not even projected to play minutes, but I guarantee you can't guarantee you. I think it's likely that he gets minutes. We haven't seen Rondo go out there and play like 30 minutes in a game, and against the Pistons in a game they should be able to control. It's not like he necessarily needs to put up 40. Now, he could put up 40, but I think it's more likely we're looking at somewhere between a 20 to 30-ish range most of the time. And I think it's being treated like a 30 to 40-ish range most of the time. And I think that's something we can take advantage of. Again, I'm still playing a lot of them, but I'm trying to use him less on FanDuel than I am on DraftKings. All right, let's get into some more questions. Let's see. We got a Peruvian person saying, do you speak English? And I don't see any other questions back. Guys, keep popping them in. We got a lively group here. We got 43 people in there that are, coming and going. And actually it's over 100 and something different viewers. So pop in your questions, pop in your thoughts. I'll be here for another 10 minutes. My voice is hurting from talking, so I'm going to take a sip because I am, that's the most I've talked. I've been trying not to talk with my throat, but excuse me. Not COVID, by the way, not COVID. I have it around here somewhere. I have a COVID test that says I don't have it, but believe me, I have all the symptoms. I just don't happen to have COVID. I do like Barton. Good question, Jeremy. It's odd that I'm not getting him in, and it's probably due to my love for Jokic because the odds of them both maxing their ceiling out without a run back aren't great to me. But if you want to do a run back with the aforementioned Sabonis or De'Aaron Fox, I think that's a really, really good way to go. I think he's too low owned on both sides. I think if I was going to play more, where I'm playing more Barton is on FanDuel, oddly enough, because it doesn't make as much logical sense because he's higher priced. There's so many good plays at the position and all that stuff. Whereas maybe you need the savings on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, I'm just finding him a little bit, interesting because you can also use him at small forward at that price. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I got the sites mixed up. DraftKings he's 5,800. FanDuel he's 54. Got it mixed up. Sorry. I still do like him on both sites, but I do think that he is the better play on FanDuel. But I for some reason I had the prices wrong, but I had the position eligibility right. And I would like him a lot better on DraftKings if he had forward eligibility because I think that the guard position is pretty loaded, as is the center position. Sensei J, buddy. I know it's rough. For those of you guys, I've had surgery twice, not because I'm vain or trying to get my nose better. In fact, I think they actually made it look a lot worse. But I've had surgery twice on my nose, and I've had another separate sinus surgery just trying to clear out my waves because I was born as a person who had trouble breathing. It's been going fine, but when the allergy seasons kick in and then you get the sinus infection, that thing can last for months. And I've been all kinds of sick in my life and horrible vomiting and things. A bad sinus infection is worse than everything else of that kind, of the regular illnesses. I can't speak to COVID. I'm just talking about the regular illnesses. Simons or Booker? Booker. What about Marvin Bagley? Good question. I do have some Marvin Bagley love on DraftKings. I think he's a really good pivot off of James Johnson, who is going to be very, very chalky. But I really like the idea of using some Bagley. I think that it's nerve-wracking with the minutes, but maybe after the All-Star break, he had a little bit of time to maybe familiarize himself more with the team. Maybe they give him a little extra run. He's keeping me off of a guy who I really wanted to play to start the day because they go double big. And maybe this is also a good argument for Bagley. I think you could see Bagley in there with Stewart more tonight than you have seen in the past. And Jeremy Grant could play the 3 you could even play Bay and Cunningham still at the 1 in the sort of stretchish 2 with the way Cleveland plays their guard rotations. So there's a lot of ways they can get different with that lineup, which could lead to some serious Bagley minutes because we know they're not trying to win games. So Kelly Olynyk doesn't necessarily need to get the 17, 20 minutes he's projected to get, even though oddly enough, he's probably the best of those 3 guys that's in real basketball right now, at least in some ways. I do have some Jeremy Grant exposure, which doesn't feel good. Just throwing it out there. He was a middling play that I left into a couple of my lineups, and I don't know if I'm going to stick with that. But speaking of the Bagley question, that was one thing I thought of. It's just there's a lot of bodies in Detroit. So obviously James Johnson is the better play, but Bagley as a pivot or in addition to, I think that's really interesting and really, really like the idea of getting some exposure. But I don't love that he's going to have ownership. Like I feel like this should be like a 10-ish% owned night for him. And I think you're going to see like probably a little bit closer to 20 because people are going to stars and scrubs it, which is an argument for, hey, how's the rest of my lineup look? Do I want to play him instead of James Johnson, who's going to be much higher owned? Do I want to play him in addition? Then you lock up both power forward spots because the center is strong. You play them with Watford, and then all of a sudden you've got a pretty predictable build. So that's the only real question that comes to me with Bagley. Matt Wolf had just one of the ways. This is what happens when you bet on Matt Wolf trying to find his game. I had literally what looked like the nuts. I was running first in the 555 for a while. I haven't bothered to check in a while because everybody sort of fell apart. I went right back to Neiman, who looked halfway through after the first 9. I thought was going to literally just do the same thing again. It's a perfect course for him, actually. He just had a bad double, a bad bounce, actually, that led to a double. But, things happen. We'll figure it out. Well, there's still room left. All right, Young or Towns? Young for me, but they're both really good plays. But it's Young for me. Herter or Hunter on FanDuel? I think Hunter is the better play. I think Herter is the lower owned play. So that's depending on the rest of your lineup, how it looks, that's how I would go with that. I do like Simons, but I like the other guys better that we just compared with versus Simons. DeAndre Hunter versus Cam Johnson. So Cam Johnson is a very I don't want to say it's like a crazy long shot or anything, but there is nothing projection-wise like Cam Johnson even a little bit. I think he's probably worth a flyer, but in all honesty, I'm not playing any of them right now on DraftKings and maybe like 1 or 2 out of 150 on FanDuel. So I might, maybe he gets in the 3 or 4. I haven't double checked, but somewhere around there. I think Wiggins is fine on FanDuel. I would never aim to get Wiggins in on a slate like this, but I wouldn't mind if I ended up with Wiggins on a slate like this, if that makes sense. That's sort of how I'm treating a lot of the forward positions because I love my guards, I love my centers, I love my power forwards. Shooting guard, small forward. Actually, shooting guard's pretty loaded, but small forward is where you have all these decisions. But that's what everyone else has too. So taking the lower owned option is kind of the route that I would suggest you embrace. I mean, that's again, not to go back to that win on Thursday. I had to play a certain narrative and only play the Clippers bench guys in order for it to work. And I needed a massive blowout. And I actually, wrote as my favorite bet of the day or whatever, that was, we wanted the Clippers massive blowout and we got it. That you have to kind of take a guy who may not be as good of a play in order to give yourself a chance to get off the chalk in some of these spots. So, any interest in Allen and Mobley on DK? Oddly enough, I'm not getting to either of them, but I do like them on FanDuel, especially Mobley especially Allen because the shot blocking upside. You never know when that 7-6 block or 2 steal game or whatever is coming from him. And this is a great matchup for it. So I really like that. We're getting Frank Jackson listed as active, even though he was downgraded earlier. All right. So that actually does mean a little bit, but not much. It's more just the other, who it hurts a little bit is Bagley. Not like in a huge way, but it's just more minutes to go to another player on the court. That's really how it hurts them. But not huge news anyway. Just keeping an eye out for anything else. Guys, if there's nothing else, I'm going to get out of here in just a minute. So keep going out there. Let's see what else we got. Doesn't look like there's anything else at the moment. But guys, you guys have been awesome. I can't wait for you to see some of these site updates that we're doing. It's a lot more work, but we've got an actual team. We've got Mark also helping us, and we're going to be in a much better place early March than we are at the moment, and things should be improving every day. Get in the Discord channel and let us know things you'd like us to change, things you'd like us to test. We've got the channel set up for it. What do we have it called right now? Let me just double check here. Sorry, the support channel. Just come on in and say, hey, here's what I'd like to see a little more of. Here's what I'd like to see a little less of. Like, I'm showing my early lineups, but if I'm ever scripting, I can start showing you my exposures, especially once we have this optimizer situation figured out. So that's just to give you guys an idea. I think that we're pretty much ready to get out of here. And it's, I think that unless there's any other questions, I probably will. But I sort of went through all my current thoughts. Oh, Edwards or Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon never crossed my mind for half a second tonight. I ended up seeing him at times and just deciding there's just no way I'm going to be able to do it. I get that other people want to play Aaron Gordon. I don't think the right way in the long-term DFS is to play Aaron Gordon almost ever. Like, we saw him fail in the situation without Jokic, without Barton in this, like, the same type of spot. I mean, he can get there. Sure. Things can happen. If no one's playing him and it's a small slate or something, that's when you want to play Aaron Gordon. When he's going to be 15% owned on a 15 and 10 on even on FanDuel, I just think, yeah, it's a great matchup, but like, do we really, really want to do this? I don't know. I don't personally feel overly excited about playing Aaron Gordon. So I am probably not going to have any shares of him, except for he may end up in some $4 in my script. So don't hate me if he does, but he's not going to be in any of my hand-built lineups at the moment, unless I run into a really desperate spot where I needed exactly 6.1 guy at power forward on FanDuel, or I needed exactly 5,600 guy. Even then on DraftKings, I'm probably going to find somebody else. So the answer is the non-Aaron Gordon, obviously. I don't know which Edwards you're talking about, though, Red Pill Al. Like, let me know which Edwards I don't know, because the Edwards and Aaron Gordon. Oh, and Aaron Gordon. I think you were asking about both of them. I do like Edwards. I think Edwards is always a great GPP play, and then you put a matchup like this out there in front of him, and this is the kind of game you could see him getting that 50 plus, and I think you're going to get low ownership on him as well. So, all right, guys. Well, we appreciate you all. We will see you guys soon. Again, get in there and let us know what you want to see and how we can improve things and make it easier for you. I will be in Discord trying to answer questions. Always hard to do right before lock. Today might not be quite as hard, knock on wood, because we've got hopefully most of the information we're going to need, but you never know when that one piece comes in and we have to change everything. And as of right now, there's only one. That first game is a standalone, right? So this is 7 o'clock. So really the only guys we're really thinking about unless we hear about anything else are Rondo. Okoro is viable, but again, not an exciting play. No Markkanen on DraftKings. Maybe you can consider him on FanDuel. I would not do it except for my $4. I do like Mobley and Allen, but I'm not getting them on DraftKings, and I think they're good on FanDuel, both of them. I love Kevin Love, though. Love and Rondo are the best plays in that game, along with Cade Cunningham for me. And I love that Cade's going to be low owned on DraftKings. It's not going to work out every time, but Cade can put up 50 any given night. I think he's going to be riding high. I think they're going to turn over the keys. I think they're going to play the young guys. They have no reason to win. Let's play Cade Cunningham tonight. So that's my thoughts on the first game. All right, guys, appreciate y'all. I'm going to get out of here and let's crush it. Let's win something.